Welcome, everybody, to the Old Time Boxing Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I'm your host for the Old Time Boxing Show, Mike Goodpaster. Right now, I'd like to welcome in the Grueling Truth's resident boxing historian, Christopher Shelton. How you doing, Chris?
Hi, Mike. It's interesting times these days, so ready to go with Zora Folley. Another great show, I hope.
Yeah, today we are going to talk about a forgotten great heavyweight contender during the late 50s into the 60s, Zora Folley, who is kind of from your neck of the woods in Arizona, even though he was born in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, he's considered a Chandler man, which is kind of a small area just by Phoenix. So I think of him as Phoenix's greatest heavyweight, number one contender twice. And he at that time in the 50s, Zora Folley as a heavyweight was really the only heavyweight. If you look at the newspapers, which was the Arizona Republic, Phoenix Gazette, same paper, same everything. And one was in the morning, one in the afternoon. So it was really just Zora Folley and nobody else if you were from Phoenix.
Yeah, and this is a guy that's probably best known for the age of 34 fighting Muhammad Ali, March 22nd, 1967, for the heavyweight championship of the world. But before that, Folley beat some really good guys. Eddie Macon, George Chuvalo, Oscar Bonavena. He beat Doug Jones. He also had draws with Carl Mildenberger and then Eddie Macon again in their first fight. So this is a guy that beat some really good competition, and when you watch his film, he was a really good boxer.
Yeah, it's considered, in many ways, he was remembered as a great boxer. I sort of just think of that hard right that he had, and he'd be a little bit more of a star in the sense that, Friday nights of the boxing stuff was prime time, Madison Square Garden, and Foley was in the midst of a period where boxing was big news if you were a sports fan and such. So boxing's kind of these days has slipped a little bit, or you have to go out of your way to pay for something. But Foley was mixed in with guys like Cleveland Williams and Sonny Liston and Doug Jones, those kinds of people, and they're all pretty big names. Boxing got these guys up and gave them names and let them fight each other. So Zora Folley, number one contender in 1958, and later on in 67. So yeah, he's a big name, and in Arizona he remains a big name. But also, I don't even know if it's important, but it seems so important to Phoenix type papers to say what a great guy he is, what a great community man he is, what a great family man. I'm not sure that's necessarily irrelevant, but it was constantly associated with his name in Arizona.
Yeah, and he died of a young age, a mysterious death, which we'll get to at the end of this show. But when we look at his boxing career, his amateur boxing career, he started boxing when he joined the U.S. Army in 1948. He won multiple All-Army and All-Service titles. He saw active duty during the Korean War, earning 5 battle stars, was discharged from the U.S. Army with the rank of sergeant in 1953, and he turned pro, signed a professional boxing contract, won his first fight against Jimmy Ingram, had 17 consecutive victories until he lost to Johnny Summerlin in 6 rounds with a suspected broken jaw after being knocked down 3 times. And despite being considered a top contender, he never got to face Floyd Patterson. And everything I read, Cus D'Amato did not want Folley to fight against Floyd Patterson.
Yeah, it was Cus D'Amato. It became such an issue that it went to the Udall brothers, who are congressmen in Arizona, to try to see if they could do something to legislate a fight against Patterson. And again, to put these things in perspective, at least from Phoenix and Chandler's perspective, for Arizona, there really weren't too many sports. You had there were no professional teams. There was Arizona State football, and you had Frank Cush before him. Dan Devine. So you had good college football team, and then just the Golden Gloves tournament. The Golden Gloves tournament, big deal under Al Thin, and Al Thin was the godfather of Arizona boxing, the first manager of Zora Folley. So Folley is individually standing out as a sports person in a way that when you look back on it, it's sometimes not quite as easy to figure out, because the guys he beat, like somebody he beat to get to that number one spot, was like Pete Rodenberger, who was what a great Olympic fighter, but he hadn't even won a pro fight when he fought Foley. He fought Patterson before that without a win, knocked Patterson down. It's still a little cloudy how they come up, like even today, how they come up with these number one rankings and who it is. But yes, at the point of 1958, to have Foley at number one versus Floyd Patterson, there is a feeling, at least in Arizona corner, that Foley could beat Patterson, but Cus D'Amato just won't fight him, and there's not a hell of a lot you can do. And in the NFL and Major League Baseball, you can't just avoid teams you don't like or But in boxing, you can avoid somebody. And Custom Auto, associated with Mike Tyson, is this great guy, and we look at him as a chicken. Well, not a chicken, practical though, but it really, screws up.
You know how legacy. I look at Customato? I look at Customato as he had, Jose Torres also, but outside of that, he had two guys like that until he got Mike Tyson. And I still think that he's part of the reason Mike Tyson had the issues he had. Nobody ever brings this up, but if you look at Mike Tyson from the time he got to Customato at the age of 12 or 13, D'Amato let him do whatever the hell he wanted.
That's absolutely true. Anything to get not even really to be the best, or to just to maneuver your way to what boxing will call you the best, and not really, in Tyson's case, absolutely no moral compass. Yes, he got Mike Tyson to think a lot about boxing, which, according to Customato, would make him not think about other things. But the guy had problems. The guy's a young guy and he needed help. And Customato is not a mentor, not a great guy like everybody thinks. And in Arizona, well, we just look at him as somebody that, yes, you were the person who Floyd Patterson went to for decisions, but then Patterson is somebody who is really well beloved and liked, and yet he's not really necessarily thought of as a great heavyweight in any way, even though he held it for several years. It's sort of a feeling of, but they were maneuvering, fighting guys like,
Rademacher,
guys,
McNeely.
Yeah, exactly. Or Rademacher, a guy who never even won a pro fight, knocks Patterson down in the first round. And unfortunately, I don't want to pick on Floyd Patterson, but I can pick on D'Amato. And, smart guy, just what does it mean to boxing if you're not really trying to be the best? You're just maneuvering for what they call the best.
Yeah, and with Zora Folley, I think the win that really stands out to me is after the loss to Summerlin. In 1956, he beat Nino Valdez, who a lot of people thought was this big boogeyman for Rocky Marciano, but unfortunately for Valdez, he couldn't beat Archie Moore either. And Foley pretty much dominated Valdez, won a very boring unanimous decision over the Cuban heavyweight. So I think that is the win that first probably really put him on the map, as you know, as a contender. But when you look at this, outside of that win, to get to 1958, I mean, he fought a draw with Eddie Macon, beat Pete Rademacher, and he was ranked number 1. And that leads us to his fight against Henry Cooper, which I think is one of the more controversial fights you will find. And everything I've read about this fight was that Zora Folley won the fight. And, of course... Yeah, right. And in the UK, referee Tommy Little was the only one that had a say in the decision. There were no judges. And to the shock and amazement of everybody, Tommy Little raises Henry Cooper's hand at the end of the fight.
He looked like he was only half watching the fight when he raised his hand. Tommy, that's very appropriate because, in Arizona minds, this man is gone to hell for eternity. What it really comes down to is Fenn and company, and eventually with Bill Swift, they need money. They got a fighter. They keep telling him, you're going to be heavyweight champion. And meanwhile, Zora Folley's such a nice guy, Army guy, standout guy, but he really didn't have much now. I mean, it's a girl. Well, a girl's not a bad thing, but to guys, sometimes they think she's a bad thing because she's saying, hey, you're fighting and you're on TV. How come you don't have any money? And he's saying, well, I don't really want to talk to you. You got to talk to her. I want you to talk to their asses. Why you don't have money? So then England puts up Henry Cooper, who the last 7 fights have been knocked out. 4 of those 7 fights. The guy bleeds. I look at a wall and I bleed as much as Henry Cooper. And they just bought it. They purchased Zora Folley's reputation for Cooper. Now ultimately I like Cooper and he had some good fights later on. But at the time it was just a fix. And Al Fenn and them admitted it. They needed money and they thought Foley wouldn't get robbed if he got a draw or something, which would later on would happen. That would be fine, but no, this is a fix for just giving it to the Englishman who really didn't do shit. I mean, Foley should be more aggressive. Foley should have gone for the kill or the knockout, but he beat the shit out of Cooper, and then Cooper can stand there. Cooper's a tough guy, but it was a fix for money on the Arizona side, and it's just too bad because all we recognize is legacy. And all we recognize now is a little number that says Henry Cooper won, and full SHIT. But that's what happens in boxing. You need money, and Custom Auto won't fight. He can't get the championship. They're going to Arizona congressman. He'd go to have Congress do something, and they're like, well, we're not sure we can do that. I mean, you can't just legislate or force. What do you do? Put Patterson in jail at the time? I mean, and then after that loss, now Patterson doesn't have to fight Foley. And Foley never really is in a position to, I don't know, even be the best. Just the positioning of, I could beat the heavyweight champion today if I get to fight him. And he was never in that position again after the fake loss to Cooper. And I hope England's proud of themselves because they're full of shit, but then again, so is the rest of the world.
That is shit for people that can't spell.
Yeah.
After that, he loses, of course, the number 1 ranking. He comes back, he beats Alex Mitteff, which people recognize the name because he lost to young Cassius Clay a few years later. He beats Willie Bezmenov, who was a good fighter, beats Alonzo Johnson, fights Eddie Macon, who he'd fought to draw with, and he got a big win over Macon. Macon was a good fighter, and Foley completely out-jabbed him.
Yeah, apparently it wasn't the most exciting fight of all time, but yes, Foley has the advantage, and he's willing to just sort of stick out that left jab and sort of see can make it really do anything. They can, of course, we're starting to get Patterson a lot. But yeah, the heavyweight division, even though it's on TV and such, I mean, you're still looking at Archie Moore, great light heavyweight, in his 40s now, is still one of the major players in the heavyweight division, which is sort of ridiculous in the heavyweight division. So finally, in this little period, it's hard to believe now that Cleveland Williams versus Sonny Liston was sort of looked at as, wow, these are really the 2 best heavyweights. Forget Floyd Patterson. We know Floyd Patterson. Floyd Patterson is a great guy. What a gentleman. He's a fake heavyweight champion. When you see Cleveland Williams versus Sonny Liston, you're looking at the real heavyweight champion, which, of course, Liston, after the first round, could beat up Cleveland Williams. But that's where we're at. And people don't really remember Cleveland Williams anymore. But that's where we're at, and Foley's just sort of in the cage there with, again, the Doug Jones type and a Canadian, George Chuvalo, who's just like, well, who the blank is he? And, of course, I feel bad for him because he's sort of in the mix of being ignored at that moment as a sort of circle of, come on, Floyd Patterson, fight Sonny Liston, fight somebody. We're getting tired of you fighting Swedish people. Fight somebody. And that's where the heavyweight division was at.
All right, and then next up, Zora Folley's the number 2 ranked contender by Ring Magazine. He enters a fight in July of 1960 against the number 1 contender, Sonny Liston. And this is a fight that Sonny Liston dominated, but Foley was a polished...
Foley won the first round, though.
I know, that's what I was going to say. Foley was a polished boxer. He'd won 10 fights in a row coming into it, 3 fights by knockout. And after the first knockdown, staged a brilliant rally. But then Sonny Liston, with that big jab, was just too big and too strong. He outweighed Foley by 15 pounds. And this is where Foley's lack of power really bit him in the ass.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, the heavyweight division is sort of looking for somebody that they want to call a heavyweight champion. Joe Louis is heavyweight champion. People love Joe Louis. And then Rocky Marciano, I kind of feel bad for the guy. I think more than even you, Mike, because he's sort of like that. Yeah, you're no Joe Louis, even though Rocky Marciano was beloved, undefeated. And there just was a feeling in the heavyweight division that they were looking around for a power guy, a heavyweight. And Sonny Liston matched it all. Once he could dominate Cleveland Williams, yes, he gets a high profile against Zora Folley, and Foley, technically wins the first round, but Sonny Liston looked great against Foley. And Foley, I have to admit, it's a bad matchup against Sonny Liston. Sonny Liston and English judges, or English referees, are a kryptonite for Zora Folley. So I give Sonny Liston his props. At that moment, Zora Folley's not looking like the heavyweight champion. Floyd Patterson has a fake title, and Sonny Liston is the real people's champion, sort of. And Zora Folley's hovering around with Doug Jones, George Chuvalo. A 50-year-old Archie Moore. I'm kidding. He was only about 42 or 43. But these guys, and Zora Folley's just a little bit back in the pack.
Yeah, and then after the Sonny Liston fight, he comes back. He beats Willie Bezmenov again. But then he gets upset at the Olympic Auditorium against a 12-1 Alejandro Lavarante, who knocks him down twice into 6th, twice into 7th before stopping him. And right here, it looks like Foley may have seen his better days.
He really had in many ways, and it's one of the puzzling things about Foley is you just, I have to be fair, but I don't want to be fair because Zora Folley's our heavyweight, so I got to say nice things. But yes, Foley's been dominated by some guys even before that, number 1 ranking, knocked down, knocked out. I'm not sure he's one of the great ones. It's just one of these opportunities, and he's well liked. He's an Army guy, he's a military guy, he's a nice guy. That helps you in life. So Foley is always managing to hold on to number 1, number 2 ranking, whether it's fair or not. And yeah, so he's still hanging on, even though really some guys have, beat him, knocked him out. And I can understand if somebody wanted to say Zora Folley at the moment is a little overrated, though he is one of the top, 5, 6 heavyweights in the world. I mean, that's a great accomplishment. If you're one of the top 5, 6 lawyers in the world, that's unbelievable. But in boxing, you're a bum. and Foley was even higher than that. He was put up at number 2, number 1 contender, whether he deserved it or not at this point. So, yeah, that's kind of where he's at before he faces Doug Jones, too, which I'll let you intro and all that.
Well, we're going to go to his beatdown of Henry Cooper, who December 1961 at the Empire Pool, Wembley, London, Henry Cooper was knocked out by Zora Folley at 1 minute into the second round. And this is a fight where Foley definitely gets his revenge. And this is a Cooper that's still a couple years away from the infamous knockdown of Muhammad Ali.
Yeah, this is a more legitimate Henry Cooper. He just doesn't have everybody cheating for him as far as referees and bullshit. But yeah, Foley beat the crap out of him.
Well, wait a second, Chris. They probably still were cheating for him, but they just couldn't do nothing about it because he got his ass knocked out.
And you got it right, Mike. You were right on point. In fact, that's the whole thing in 1958. Why not just knock the guy out, and not even bother with what the hell, letting this thing move on. So, yeah, this time they weren't taking chances. And Foley, you get that knockout because, these guys are cheats. They have these beautiful accents, and we get to see them in movies all the time. You're an American, you think English people are everywhere. I never see an English person ever in Phoenix, Arizona. All I know is they're cheats, and they're in the movies, and they rob Zora Folley, bastards. And Foley beat the shit out of Henry Cooper, and God bless the USA, and the Queen can go flush down a toilet.
All right, I would like to apologize to everybody in the UK that's listening right now. Those are Christopher Shelton's opinions, and a little bit mine too.
Yeah, thank you.
Next up, he gets a nice win over Mike DeJean, who he knocks out. DeJean was a good fighter. But then Foley fights Doug Jones. This is the Doug Jones that a few years later, a lot of people thought beat Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, whatever you want to call him, in the mid-'60s. Yeah. And Foley pounded out a close 10-round unanimous decision over Doug Jones. Doug Jones at the time was the second-ranked light heavyweight contender. Foley outweighed Jones by 16 pounds. And this is actually one of the few fights that I've seen Foley in that was actually an exciting fight.
I love that, Mike. That's fair game. If I talk the way I talk, Foley has to hear that. You're a boring-ass fighter, Zora Folley. But
hey, there's nothing wrong with being boring if the boring is effective, because the goal is to win.
Right, and the Doug Jones fight, the first 2 rounds are just, a lot of fun to watch. Foley knocks Jones down in the first round, and, kind of a heavy favorite at the moment, Madison Square Garden, national television. And in the second round, they start slugging it out. And yes, Doug Jones in the first round against the Cassius Clay, injured his jaw. A lot of people think Doug Jones won the distance. And the funny thing is, the person who kind of took the worst out of this is somehow George Chuvalo. George Chuvalo would eventually knock out Doug Jones, but there was so much debate. Oh, Doug Jones really isn't that good. And the way we talk, that Chuvalo knocking out Doug Jones didn't get quite the attention maybe it deserved. So Doug Jones is a hell of a fighter, and it's not his fault he was the best person to face Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali before Frazier showed up on the scene. And unfortunately, Doug Jones got the best of Foley.
Well, how about this? I don't know that he was the best fighter to face Cassius Clay, but I think that he had the best style to face Cassius Clay and have a chance.
Perfect words. Styles make fights, and that's boxing wouldn't mean a thing if it wasn't for Styles make fights, and that was the right person at the right time. So yes, Doug Jones wasn't the best person to face Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay, but he gave Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay the best fight.
Well, it's like this. I mean, outside of Doug Jones, to get a prime Ali, which you say maybe before 1974 when things really went downhill for Ali, or 75, Doug Jones and Ken Norton had the best styles to compete with Muhammad Ali.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And again, the way we are in boxing and with our passionate opinions, somehow George Chuvalo gets to face Muhammad Ali. And if he had knocked out Muhammad Ali, would not be heavyweight champion in Canada, because he sort of downlooked. I knocked out Doug Jones. Doug Jones, that's a great win on my resume. But we're all debating, this and that, and saying this and that. So Doug Jones, was one of the good ones in there, along with Zora Folley. I'm not even sure Doug Jones. I don't even know how honest or fair I'd be to put him behind Zora Folley, but they fought twice. In the second fight, Doug Jones looked damn good, and he looked damn good against Ali Clay. And you're right, put him against somebody else, against George Chuvalo, and Chuvalo don't go down. I don't care what you do, Chuvalo don't go down. You could nuke the guy don't go down. All right,
yeah, so, and Zora Folley, as you said, fought a rematch with Doug Jones. Doug Jones, in one of the biggest, probably upset of the year in 1962, stopped Zora Folley in the 7th round, and that's after Doug Jones had to climb off the canvas in the 1st round. And I think that was right around Christmas time. Jones weighed 185, which was 5 or 6 pounds more than he did in the first fight. Foley weighed 195. Once again, this was a really good fight, but Doug Jones showed exactly how good he was in this fight. Doug Jones is a guy maybe we ought to do a show about at some point.
I love that. Actually, just also to say, this is Madison Square Garden. Now, as a tease, I could say, by the way, I kind of forget, where is Madison Square Garden? Now, of course, most people would say New York City. You're being ridiculous. Actually, Phoenix's stadium was always called Madison Square Garden. That was our biggest. We had Madison Square Garden. Only nobody in Phoenix knows that now, so I don't know why I would expect anybody outside of Phoenix to know. So there were 2 Madison Square Gardens, but when Zora Folley had his big stage fights, it was not the Phoenix Madison Square Garden. It was the New York City, like against Doug Jones 2, Madison Square Garden.
Because the one thing I would like to look into, did Doug Jones fight for the light heavyweight title?
I don't think so. If he did, then,
I thought he fought for the New York State Athletic Commission light heavyweight title against Harold Johnson. But the one thing I do know is the guy who was considered the best light heavyweight at the time was Bob Foster, and he beat Bob Foster. I think they fought at heavyweight in 1962. But
yep. And go ahead. Oh, yeah. I was just gonna say, Foley this time around just stayed on cue. He had great respect for Foster, and some people felt Joe Louis said, "This is the most boring fight I've ever seen in my life." Well, thank you, Joe Louis. But Zora Folley's cautious of Foster because this guy's a great boxer. Foley's reputation really is as a boxer. It's sometimes because what Foley does is against someone like say a Henry Cooper. Henry Cooper's got the great left hook, so what he does is he just takes away your best shot. He moves to the side and just takes away your number one weapon, and it's deceiving when you watch it because it looks like Foley really isn't doing anything, but it's like football, baseball, anything. Because I'm going to take away the person's number one weapon or try to defuse it, and then I'm just going to basically stand there in front of them, try to and cock my right and sort of see what's coming at me as sort of a counter person, and then sort of sludging forward. And Foster, like Eddie Nickens, he couldn't quite figure out what to do to get past a Foley, and Foley's going to do, if nothing else, the guy's patience is I'll get out, and you have to make moves or do something. And so I think it's a really interesting and fun win against Bob Foster. But yeah, you're going to have to make your move against Foley because Foley's just patience, and whatever the win is, and a good win, but I guess a boring fight.
Yeah, and then he fought Ernie Terrell, and this is another styles make fights. Ernie Terrell dominated Zora Folley because Zora Folley was too patient, and he probably needed to attack Ernie Terrell because Terrell, even though their weight was about the same, if you watch any film or highlights from this fight, Ernie Terrell looks like a grown man, and Zora Folley looks like a midget, even though the weight's about the same.
Yeah.
And Terrell just kind of controlled him with that jab. He'd hit him with a straight left. He would hit him with the left jab, shook him up with rights. Ernie Terrell was a boring fighter, but he was a huge fighter back in the day, height-wise, and gave a lot of people trouble.
He was, and Ernie Terrell's just, the victim of how do we look at them at the time and later on in a sport that's all about opinions. So somehow at some juncture in the 1960s, actually Ernie Terrell owns part of the heavyweight championship with Muhammad Ali, which sounds embarrassing and ridiculous. And then he didn't want to call Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali wanted to call him Cassius Clay, so it became the "What's my name? What's my name?" And that becomes Ernie Terrell's legacy. Ernie Terrell says, I'm not an Uncle Tom, and by the way, what the hell's an Uncle Tom, and all kinds of stuff. But against Zora Folley, he basically had the advantage and the boxing. I'm going to stick my jab out and knock you around a little bit. And Foley has to be more aggressive, and Foley was but he lost 2 big rounds heading into the 8th round. He basically lost the fight. It's only 10 rounds. He'd already basically lost the fight, and Foley, bleeding from the nose, finally starts to come alive, and at least. I don't know, it staggers, but he wobbles Terrell a little bit, and that's a big win. But unfortunately, Ernie Terrell's reputation is wrapped up in Muhammad Ali's sort of voice and how Muhammad Ali wants to look at things. So he's the what's my name fighter rather than, hey, this is a really good fighter. And, yeah, is he co-equals with Muhammad Ali at any time as heavyweight champion? That's embarrassing, but that's the way boxing is now. We got two guys from England saying they're the heavyweight champions now. Who knows who is? But he definitely was better than Zora Folley when they met.
All right, then next up, another styles make fights. Zora Folley beats George Chuvalo. I think a lot of this was the experience of Folley against Chuvalo. And let's face it, I mean, George Chuvalo was a wild swinger who was at his best getting in close, but when you watch this fight, he had a hard time getting there as Folley basically kept that left jab in his face. And the one thing was when Chuvalo did land, it was one punch at a time. He could not really land any combinations at all against Folley, and Folley won this fight relatively easy.
And this is where you get to see actually Zora Folley, the boxer, because, yeah, you're right. Chuvalo, I really like Chuvalo, but ultimately Chuvalo, once he realizes that he's sort of outclassed just enough in a boxing sense, because once you know you're at a disadvantage, that disadvantage just sort of grows on you, or you're in trouble at a certain point. So, yes, about the only thing he can hope is can he just kind of grab the guy, force him against the ropes, pin him into something. And Folley, he's good with Folley. And so Folley, a nice boxing exhibition against George Chuvalo where he's going to try to force Chuvalo to do something that just really isn't in Chuvalo's, he doesn't have a briefcase full of stuff to do. So Folley looks good against Chuvalo. And I enjoy watching that fight, though, maybe some people think it's like watching a clock or something. But it's kind of fun to see a Chuvalo or later on Oscar Rodriguez trying to see what are they going to do. They're going to have to try to break through Folley's defense. And yeah, I got the best of Chuvalo, and God bless Canada. I don't hate them as much as England, but Folley beat him.
Well, we didn't have a revolutionary war against them. It was against England. Then we go to Germany, Frankfurt, Germany, where Folley gets robbed again because everything I've read about this fight was he dominated a fight. He bloodied Carl Mildenberger, who would later go to distance, or almost go to distance. Was it 12 rounds against Cassius Clay? He would eventually lose.
He gave a good fight.
Yeah, he put up a good fight. Carl Mildenberger was a solid fighter, fought a tough fight with Oscar Bonavena, but this fight should not have been a draw. Everything I saw, the unofficial scorecards usually range in like the 8-2 to 9-1, but they scored the fight a draw. And as Folley said after the fight, I thought I won, but it isn't as bad as the decision I lost to Brian London or lost to Henry Cooper in London, England.
Yeah, he's talking in sort of retrospect about these things, but yes, at least Germany didn't, like the 58, let it call it a draw. No, it wasn't a draw. Folley dominated the fight. But if you're going to pull your fake stuff, you go in somebody else's home court, you're at a disadvantage. You better knock him out. And Folley didn't. But, yeah, he dominated a fight. And it just would be outrageous. And it didn't – Mildenberger didn't need it. A draw is fine. A draw looks good. It's not exactly honest, but it's better than just some teeny little referee making up, crap. Mildenberger got a chance against Ali and shocked everybody, gave him a pretty good fight, or at least – I think it's just because nobody thought anybody could really compete against the undefeated Muhammad Ali. And Mildenberger looked a lot better than that, and he was a southpaw. He threw Ali off a little bit. So, good for the man and good for Germany. It turns out Nazis aren't as bad as England, but they're not nice people too. And a fake draw. But a fake draw, I can live with that, and Zora Folley can live with that. He beat Mildenberger, came out a draw in Germany. All right, that's fine for everybody.
All right, then he fought Oscar Bonavena, who was a young heavyweight at the time and only his 9th fight. Zora Folley completely dominated it. And I think this is something where I think Bonavena's people thought that Folley was on the downslide and thought that they could get a name victory for Bonavena, but that was clearly not the case. This was a complete mismatch. Zora Folley dominated this fight, probably winning every round.
Well, yeah, it's actually kind of for me fun to watch, and I like Bonavena, the Latino Argentinian, who he's sort of in a stylistic battle with Foley, where Foley does have the advantage on him, round for round, the same sort of guys, almost like a doppelganger, except Foley is a better boxer, better hand speed, better accuracy. And you can see as these fights progress, Foley is a better fighter in the early rounds. And so as Bonavena is getting sort of his energy going and sort of thinking he has to be aggressive, Foley finally, in their doppelganger battle, knocks Bonavena down in the 8th round, and it's sort of fun to watch that generalship back and forth, and then Bonavena becomes more aggressive, and maybe he should have done that from the get-go because Bonavena has a lot of energy. So Good for Foley, and like us, knocked Joe Frazier down twice when Frazier was undefeated, and it was one more knockdown, and there's no Joe Frazier undefeated. But these things work out the way they work out. So good win for Foley.
And then next up, he fights the light heavyweight champion Bob Foster, and Foster loses the fight to Foley. Foley outweighs him by 30 pounds. Basically, just stood there in one uncomfortable decision. Bob Foster was a great light heavyweight, but not capable of fighting at heavyweight. I think he lost to every heavyweight he fought. But the disappointing here,
damn good light heavyweight.
Yeah, the disappointing thing here is, again, just not much action from Foley.
Right, and it is. I mean, I get to be sort of a prejudice for Foley because there's reasons for that. But at the same time, I have to acknowledge that Foley's not the most exciting guy to watch, and it's not always fair in my mind, even trying to be impartial, that he keeps sort of holding on to the number one, number two sort of status. But again, there's something about, a military guy with his clean family. He's running on the city council at Chandler at the time. So is he really a politician? I don't know who is, but they called him a politician. He's very big in the Chandler community. He's really Phoenix's biggest celebrity. I mean, we don't have a pro basketball team. We don't have a pro football team. Some say we still don't have pro teams. Anyway, I'm just kidding. Anyway, all we really have is, Arizona State football and Zora Folley. And Foley just, constantly with this. And don't forget, he's a great family man. Don't forget, he was in the Army. Well, these things are important, but it seems like his image was also very important in keeping Zora Folley in this sort of status that as he's getting older, I'm not sure how much it's deserved. And then when you get to look back on these things, would people really enjoy Zora Folley fights? Well, I watched Doug Jones, too, against Foley. But, yeah, it's hard to even recommend these things.
Yeah, and then he gets the title shot against Muhammad Ali. And it ended up being Ali's last title fight. Ali had planned to fight Oscar Bonavena on May 27th in Tokyo, Thad Spencer July 22nd in San Francisco. However, 7 days before the Foley fight, he was ordered to report for induction into the United States Army in April. Ali was a conscientious objector, refused to be inducted, and due to that refusal, this ended up being his final fight. And the thing that stood out to me about this fight is I think Foley did accomplish some things, and Foley did show us how good he was. He was able to cut the ring down on Ali. He hit the champion more often than probably any other opponent had with solid right hands.
Absolutely.
He slipped Ali's jab. He didn't panic when Ali got cute with the faking and the feigning. He forced Ali to miss several good punches. On the negative side, of course, besides just being knocked unconscious, he obstinately clung to one strategy. And that was basically while moving to his right, he kept looking to throw a right-hand counter. And it didn't take Ali long to learn that he could go in flat-footed and ram home a good right hand, which so many people at that time didn't think Ali possessed. And it was kind of popular opinion, looking back at the writings at the time, that Ali just played with Foley in the first two rounds. But I think it is more likely that he was kind of just trying to figure Foley out, and I think Foley's initial game plan was good enough to possibly even beat Ali, but Ali was so great, Ali could figure him out and respond to it.
And there's also the talk that at the time the undefeated Muhammad Ali couldn't take a punch, and Foley managed to land. Not absolutely quite as perfect clean as you hope, but he was landing on Ali. Won two of the first three rounds. And you can see Ali really is respecting Foley, but he's also jumping in and out with his snap jab and trying to figure out Foley. By the end of the third round, the fourth round, he didn't do nothing for a round and a half. He's just really now I'm going to maneuver myself, and once he does, he knows he's on the positive end of what's going to be sort of one-sided from that point on. But Muhammad Ali was very open that I like Zora Folley because this man called me Muhammad Ali instead of my slave name, and I like the guy. And one of the most touching stories about Muhammad Ali, and I got to say, Muhammad Ali, there are gyms in Phoenix. He's banned the day he dies. Not that he cares, not that he knew, but this whole Vietnam stuff had gone nuts and how people hated Muhammad Ali and what a traitor he was. And instead of a great military, what a upstanding guy like Zora Folley. But when he did knock out Foley, he actually went over to Foley's side, picked up one of his kids and said, let me tell you something about your father. If I had faced your father in his prime, I never would have had a chance. Now, that's very nice talk. I never would have had a chance. Your father would have beat me. And that's one of the lovely Muhammad Ali moments too, and he put his arm around Zora Folley and said, it's just Muhammad Ali is that the nice guy when he wanted to be, and he likes Zora Folley, and Zora Folley was a nice guy, and it's just too bad. At 34, I don't think Zora Folley ever could really take Muhammad Ali because Muhammad Ali too fast. He's just too damn fast.
Yeah, Ali was going to figure him out. It may have just taken an extra couple rounds.
But he had to respect the right, and he said, I believe that this guy, if I let him land clean, it could be dangerous, and Foley did land. I mean, not too many people even landed against Muhammad Ali before he was forced into not allowed to fight. And Foley, looks good, but yeah, it was a really difficult thing because they really set up Foley for an attrition battle, and you have no chance in a boxing battle against Muhammad Ali. You really have to kind of go for it, and Foley looks as good as he can look for 3 rounds. It's just you're up against the greatest guy in history at the time where he was the greatest even for him, and it was a little too much for our poor Arizonan.
All right, next up, Zora Folley proved he was done by losing to Brian London, and I don't have a whole lot. I mean, I have respect for all boxers, but Brian London wasn't very good, Chris.
Yeah, Brian London.
But this from what I saw of it, was a good fight.
And they're not, but I like Brian London. He's just not a fighter. He's a nice guy.
Well, put it like this: he's a fighter. He's not a boxer.
Yeah, and really, when you put him at the higher ranks, absolutely, Mike. You know what? I don't want to be unfair to the man. Absolutely, and he stood in there. And,
he was a tough dude. He just wasn't very good.
And a funny guy. You listen to the guy talk, and he's wearing his big nerdy glasses, and he's a funny guy. It's just the heavyweight champion. There can only be one, and that's tough times when you have Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, and this big guy, George Foreman, up around the end.
Yeah, and you look at the rest of the career, which is not much after that fight in 1967. He loses a close majority decision to Oscar Bonavena in a rematch. He finished his career by losing to Mac Foster. And Mac Foster was a guy that I think started his career 24-0 with 24 knockouts, but he wasn't that good. And this is a guy I think there's no doubt, if this is 1960s Zora Folley against Mac Foster, I think he would have beat the hell out of Mac Foster. But after that fight, he retires. And shortly after, go ahead.
It was also shortly before what we're going to get to as far as his death and stuff. But the Mac Foster one's the only reason it's also still it registers as a KO1, and that could be whatever it is. But he really beat the shit out of Zora Folley. I mean, he knocked him down 6 times. He really gave Foley a beating. Foley kept getting up, and finally, after 6 times getting knocked down, the referee stopped it. And it does become important in the sense that is something wrong with Foley, and is there a problem to take a beating like that? And it isn't clear at the time other than maybe Foley should retire, but it is going to become just a little bit confusing as we get to that would be his final fight. It wasn't too long where there's an incident which we're going to talk about, and just Zora Folley going to come out of it alive.
Yeah, and over the years, all kinds of questions and theories about Zora Folley's death have existed, including that he was bumped off by the mob, and a lot of this is fueled in large part by the puzzling unavailability of the official autopsy and police reports filed by authorities. So you want to go through the death and kind of what you think might have happened here?
Sure. It's involving Chandler police. First of all, Arizona cops are the worst. They have even now, there's felonies against Joe Arpaio for just arresting Latinos and stuff. We're full of crap, our law enforcement. And incidentally, so Zora Folley's with another guy. He's called sort of a professional hanger-on, a guy sort of looking for a big name. But Zora Folley considers him a friend or a person to hang out with. And there's 2 girls. Now, this is Zora Folley, the family man, Mr. Family Man. So there's 2 girls, 2 guys in a swimming pool. And I guess the 2 are roughhousing, playing around. I mean, I'm still trying to sort of look at this pool. And Foley, in the midst of this guy giving him sort of a throw or a half-wrestling throw, Foley apparently, the side of his head hits the concrete, the pool. If that happens, that could be a hard blow. And Foley, maybe he's taking some shots to the head with, as we could see in his last fight. Something's up. But anyway, Zora Folley will not live through it. And then there could have been more questions of what's going on. Did this guy really throw the guy accidental, or is this guy, responsible for something? But he stood there, talked to the Chandler police. The 2 women talked to Chandler police. And then the wife, quite frankly, didn't want publicity for this. She says, this is no good. We've got a reputation. This is our community. And as bad as it is, she, in a way, let her own husband kind of go to not have this thing really investigated. She didn't want to. She just the sort of reporter Zora Folley is cheating on her. Now it's not clear. Fooling around with a girl and actually fooling around is something different. And can you get killed in a pool accident if somebody throws you hard enough or accidentally slip or something? Yeah, I guess you could. But by Chandler police not releasing information, even though they were doing it at the respect of Foley's widow, it looks bad. It looks like, is there a way we can watch a videotape of what happened? It really seems like a guy roughhoused a little too hard and should have been looked at a little bit harder. But when Zora Folley's wife does not want this investigated anymore, it's just unfortunate, but that's the person who has the vote, and it was just protect his reputation, even though now people think the mob did it. People think, who knows, England did it. No, I'm just kidding. But it looks bad for, Arizona police, though Arizona police suck, so maybe they deserve to look bad. But Zora Folley, a weird accident with a guy who's probably an asshole, who threw him hard or he slipped or something. But, yeah, if you just take yourself in the concrete of a pool and kind of hit yourself to the side of the head, it can happen by accident. Absolutely. So there's no way to say that there's a murder, just, roughhousing with girls around. And when girls wear those bikinis, us guys get a little stupid. And Zora Folley did too, married or not.
Yeah, and the other weird thing here is you have, of course, the strange, mysterious deaths of Sonny Liston around the same time, but also longtime
Oscar
contemporary.
Bonavena getting killed at a
yeah,
brothel.
And also Eddie Machen, who died in a similarly mysterious circumstances when he fell from his windows in his pajamas in August of 1972. The one thing that keeps people from questioning Eddie so much is that he'd suffered from severe depression all of his life, and he had attempted suicide 10 years before. But a lot of mystery surrounds a lot of these heavyweight contenders from the 1960s.
Absolutely. And Mike, you do football too, and it really, you have to recognize that these shots to the head are doing something that we didn't know. We didn't know that actually a person could become violent and it's not really them. A person could become suicidal and it's not really them. We don't really know anything about it. All again is we have a weird pool incident where Zora Folley doesn't come out alive, and quite frankly, his last fight was less than a year earlier, and he got pummeled and beat the crap out of in the head. And who knows what's happening to these boxers? And then again, hey, you know what? Maybe it was just a crazy accident from a couple cute chicks. And a guy's a jerk, but who knows? These boxing punches and what's going on in the head can make people suicidal and can make them violent, even though nobody really wants to hear that stuff. Clearly now,
well,
we know
look at Junior Seau. That was a guy that never had any issues.
God.
Look what happened there, and I mean,
that's just awful.
Yeah, I've talked to all kinds.
He's on my mind too. He's on my mind when I'm talking about Zora Folley and these guys like Macon and stuff like that. That we don't know that these punches and head injuries weren't a little more severe than anybody would have guessed at the time.
Well, I guarantee you they were, because they also have a tendency back then to let the fights go a little longer. And also these guys fought a lot more often. Even if they were knocked out, they were back fighting a month later.
Yeah, and the thing is, when you're fighting guys like Oscar Bonavena and George Chuvalo, I mean, you're taking some punches and you're going up against it, certainly in retrospect against Chuvalo. You're not knocking the guy down. You're not knocking him out. So you're going to have to just take whatever you can take from George Chuvalo, knowing you can outbox him. But that's still not fun, taking and having this big Canadian hit and pound on you, or any of these other guys hitting and pounding on you.
Yeah, I mean, hell, if you look at Bonavena, that's a guy that hit Joe Frazier a lot, and he hit Muhammad Ali a lot. I mean, he was a good fighter.
He was. He's a good guy. He's just because, as I said, some of these guys, and the Doug Jones, interesting idea for a future one too. They are good. It's just it's so brutal that boxing, it puts you on either you're number one or you're a bum. And yeah, I'm kind of glad that we're trying our best. Even Mildenberg to try to say, what, these guys are good too. It's just somebody's the best, and Zora Folley.
Hey, you know what? You're not going 12 or 13 rounds with a young Muhammad Ali unless you can fight.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. And Muhammad Ali at his very peak, to even have to respect you and say, I've got to be cautious, this guy's right. That means you have a hell of a right. And yes, you may think he's a nice man and respect him, but that's not, Muhammad Ali's more concerned about his right for those first 3 rounds, not was he, a good guy as a human being.
Yeah. All right, Chris, we going to do Ezra Charles next show, or do you want to go a different way?
We're going to go Cincinnati. We win Phoenix Chandler for us. Incidentally, just so people know, there's an 8 p.m. curfew right now in Phoenix, the dumbest thing ever. So we're going to do Cincinnati and maybe learn a little bit about Cincinnati.
Oh, there's like
culture.
a 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. curfew in Cincinnati. And actually, with that
Is there?
curfew, the first night they had the curfew, they actually arrested everybody on the streets, and now nobody's protesting anymore.
Oh, I went out and got orange juice yesterday. I thought, actually, give me midnight. I want to walk and get orange juice. It was myself and 2 black streetwalkers. And the cop drove by, and I said, I got a few things to say about Phoenix police myself. You people suck. You guys are criminals. Anyway, they just drove by me and left me alone. Let me get his orange juice. But, I look forward to doing Cincinnati culture.
They're probably waiting for you somewhere. They're going to beat the hell out of you. Just don't want anybody to film it.
That's it, or I'll see a cute girl in a bikini by a pool, and I'll end up getting knocked into the side of a concrete side.
Hey, but now since we've talked about it on this show, we can open an investigation.
I like that idea, and we'll find some cute girls to get in bikinis and really get down to the lowdown of what happened. No, I'm just kidding. So I look forward to it. Ezra Charles is one of the great ones. I'm really glad you're from Cincinnati. Just to do Ezra Charles, he's just one of my favorites. So it should be just a lot of fun.
For my money, the greatest light heavyweight of all time, even though he never won the light heavyweight title. But 3 or 4 wins over Archie Moore means you're pretty damn good. Also beat guys like Harold Johnson. So we'll talk about Ezra Charles here in a week or two. Make sure you watch for that. I want to remind everybody to check out the Retired Boxers Foundation with Jackie Richardson and Alex Ramos. Go to Facebook and find them at the Retired Boxers Foundation. And Chris, any final words before we sign off?
Yeah, if I could just say one, and I appreciate it, Mike. You know what we'll do, if it's okay on the Grueling Truth, is we'll put a final interview I did with Dennis Taylor, who's retired from boxing, but he was my a person who put me on the air in the San Francisco Monterey area for 10 years. I was honored to be the chief historian for Ringside Boxing Show, and Dennis is a great guy. So our final interview was the boxer who was champion when Jesus from Nazareth was alive. So we'll see if we can put that on in the next couple of days. And God bless Dennis. Good luck in life and that kind of thing. And thank you, Mike, for letting me even say something.
Oh, no problem. We wish Dennis and the Ringside Boxing Show the best. And for now, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. I want to remind everybody you can follow us on Twitter at Grueling Truth. You can also follow us on Facebook. Just look for the Grueling Truth Facebook page. Go to YouTube. Check out the boxing videos and all the other shows on our YouTube page, which, of course, is called The Grueling Truth. You can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, over 300 different outlets worldwide right now. So for now, I'm Mike Goodpaster. He's Chris Shelton, and you've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.